We priests talk to thousands, but the things you print will be read by millions.
Kolbe's words were prophetic. The friars labored at the printing presses around the clock to fulfill the skyrocketing circulation demands, often reaching over 1 million. An extension of Kolbe himself, Niepokalanów was a marvel of efficiency. It was a house of prayer, work, and study. And during World War II, when widespread persecution of the Jewish people began in Poland, it became a house of refuge.
He welcomed a Jewish family and hid them in our friary. And secondly, Father Kolbe ordered us friars to take care of the Jews. There were 3,000 of them here in the friary at times, and he ordered us to feed them just like Poles.
Father Maximilian was kind to all. He would never reject anyone, even his enemies. On several occasions when German soldiers wanted photographs taken with Father Maximilian, he would warmly welcome them.
Father Kolbe answered right away. Fine. He didn't give it a moment's thought. Father Kolbe had no enemies, and grabbed the phone right away and called Father Boniface. And he said to him, "My child," he'd always call us children, "come over with the camera. You'll take our picture in front of the statue of Our Lady."
Father Maximilian, like Sister Faustina, believed that one deed of mercy is actually a perpetual act, no matter how small or insignificant. He often stressed to the many friars under his supervision that a good example becomes a living testimony to those who witness it, urging all to imitation.
I personally thought of Father Maximilian as a really ordinary man back then. And only now, after many years of reflection, and through a re-examination of his life, as it were, as it is preserved in my memory, I discovered that he was like one of us, but he was not one of us.
Despite poor health caused by tuberculosis and only partial use of one lung, Father Kolbe never lost the intensity of his determination to evangelize, using the latest technology of his time. By the mid-1930s, Father Kolbe headed not only the largest Catholic publishing house in Poland, but the largest Franciscan friary in the world, where more than 700 priests and brothers lived and worked. This is the only film footage known to exist of Father Maximilian Kolbe. It was taken at a ceremony celebrating the 10th anniversary of Niepokalanów. Never one to fear the unknown, Kolbe had already decided to expand his media apostolate beyond Poland and even Europe. In March 1930, without knowing a word of Japanese, he set sail with 4 brothers to preach Christ's gospel in the Orient. He arrived in Nagasaki, Japan on April 24th, and exactly 1 month later, with the help of translators, published the first edition of the Seibo no Kishi magazine, the Japanese version of the Night of the Immaculata. Today, it is the most prolific Catholic periodical in Japan. After his arrival, Father Maximilian was inspired to build his new friary, Mugenzai no Sono, or the Garden of the Immaculate, on the slopes of Mount Hikosan. It was to be the Japanese equivalent of his Polish Niepokalanów. Locals said the Polish priest was foolish to build his friary on such steep ground, sloping away from the picturesque town. They were mistaken. On August 9th, 1945, an atomic bomb leveled Nagasaki. Because of its odd location, Mugenzai no Sono was completely spared. It still flourishes there today. In 1936, after 6 years in Japan, Father Kolbe returned home to Poland and immediately resumed his duties as superior at Neopokolanu. But this time, a menacing shadow lingered over his spiritual city. The German secret state police, known as the Gestapo, viewed Kolbe with great suspicion. He was already labeled as an enemy agitator because of a magazine article he had published on truth. His influential newspaper was becoming increasingly more critical of the Nazis. The flourishing work of his spiritual army of brothers and priests represented a direct contradiction to Nazism. It was only a matter of time before the Gestapo would come for Father Kolbe. At 9:45 in the morning on February 17, 1941, a brother phoned from Neopokolanov's front gate. 2 Gestapo cars had arrived, demanding to see Father Kolbe at once.
I can't forget the moment, February 17th, when the Gestapo came. Some of them were in uniform, some in plain clothes. They gathered the arrested friars here. They were sitting on the bed and asking Father Kolbe, "So, Father, you printed that paper, the little daily here." "Yes, I did." "So, Father, you allowed them to write articles against us, the godless Nazis." "Yes, I did." "Then, Father, you come with us." They arrested them all, took them to the car. Father Kolbe blessed us for the last time and said, "I shall not see you ever again."
Father Maximilian was immediately taken to Pawiak prison in Warsaw. In an effort to free their beloved superior and friend, 19 brothers signed a petition offering personally to take his place in prison. Their plea was rejected.
It was an enormous prison, constructed under the Tsar's rule after the January uprising. There were thousands of prisoners there, and Father Kolbe was locked in there too. He was beaten there for wearing his habit. A German from the Gestapo, Scharfuller, yanked his rosary away from him and asked, "Do you believe in this Christ of yours?" "I do." And for each "I do," he slapped him on the face. And finally Father Kolbe fell to the floor, and the German went away.
Father Maximilian spent 3 months in Pawiak prison before his transfer by boxcar to Auschwitz in southern Poland. If hell has an entrance, it would look like this. Auschwitz was evil incarnate, a vile place of systematic atrocity surrounded by lethal high-voltage fences. For most who passed through these gates, death was their only escape. The administrators and armed personnel at Auschwitz were selected to carry out Adolf Hitler's program of extermination of all perceived enemies. To accomplish this goal, prisoners were subjected to a system of terror and refined torture. The camp's basic function during its entire existence was the killing of individuals deported to it. Upon his arrival here, the 47-year-old Kolbe was tattooed with his new name, number 16670. Like all new prisoners arriving daily at the camp, he was greeted with the same mocking speech.
"You have not come to a sanitarium, but a Nazi concentration camp from which there is no other exit except a crematorium. If this does not please anyone, throw yourself into the barbed wire immediately. If there are any Jews in the convoy, you do not have a right to live more than 2 weeks. Priests can live 1 month, all others 3 months."
Today they walk freely through the camp's front gate. But when they entered this same gate more than 50 years ago, former prisoners Ted Wojtkowski and Adam Jurkiewicz had been stripped of every freedom. Both of these Polish men, now in their 70s, miraculously survived several horrifying years in Auschwitz. It was a sweltering day in 1941 when the destinies of these 2 men were forever joined with Francis Gajowniczek and Father Maximilian Kolbe.